In 1975, the Tidewater area and the country were beginning to see a shift in the focus of local law enforcement. Where police once focused on charging the queer community for violating sodomy laws, they now put the jobs and livelihoods of queer people in their crosshairs. Military service members were being discharged from their positions for engaging in same-sex relationships, and because their, quote, sexual morals were directly related to their military fitness, end quote. 149 people were discharged from the military that year for similar reasons. In early 1976, a raid of the pantry fueled Fred Osgood, Joseph McKay, and Marge Reed to get involved in making a change. At the beginning of the summer, Fred and his partner Daryl started meeting with Joseph McKay to discuss what could be done. They met at the Q and started making plans to have a kickoff event. They were approved to use the Unitarian Church of Norfolk as a meeting place for their first spaghetti dinner. Fueled with a desire to change the political environment and stop the attack on the queer community, they started meeting to discuss a game plan to make a change. At the Unitarian Universalist Gay Caucus office, or the UUGC office near The Hague, Our Own Community Press, Norfolk's very own queer newspaper, began as a newsletter in September of 1976. Our Own was one of the very first queer newspapers, formed a month before the Washington Blade, the longest-running gay newspaper, and released their first issue 3 months after the Stonewall riots. Beginning as a newsletter and transitioning into a newspaper, Our Own built the foundations that pre-Stonewall periodicals established, queer literature that built community bonds. Unlike standard newspapers of the time, Our Own provided local, community, and national news and invited readers to take their involvement a step further by participating in community events. By being a source for local queer news, Our Own helped to create an environment where queer people could find safe spaces to meet and form a community, learn how to become activists for their own rights, and gain a better understanding of the resources and healthcare available locally. In their very first years, Our Own staunchly committed to third-person reporting. Our Own notated the impact that they had on their community. In their December 1976 issue, the editors wrote,
"The group is now organized enough to help gay people find doctors, lawyers, social workers, apartments, friends, a way home, or the better side of being gay."
In building a community along with a press, Our Own strengthened bonds with local queer businesses and helped to establish a network that brought together an otherwise socially isolated population. In the early 1980s, Our Own, a few years into production, was still trying to find its groove with their volunteer base. They started to edge further away from newsletter production and began looking into selling ad space. The paper strongly maintained its community bonds with a focus not on breaking or urgent news, but community-based articles spanning the impact of national, regional, and local news. Our Own scope had begun to expand, however, and Our Own covered a Texas court striking down a sodomy law giving same-sex couples the right to privacy. Our Own also began reporting on AIDS, more than a year before the New York Times. As it grew as a topic of discussion in Norfolk, Our Own presented national information about AIDS, as well as AIDS news closer to home, such as medical advice and references to a supportive medical community. Our Own created an expansive amount of content around the disease and followed AIDS statistics closely. When standard newspapers dodged the topic, Our Own continued to keep people informed. During this time, they advertised free, local HIV/AIDS testing, updated the community on the cases and medical findings, and advocated for the people affected. In addition to this, Our Own continued publishing, with a focus on local queer news. During the years of 1994 to 1996, Our Own had grown into a full-fledged newspaper, following industry-standard datelines and formatting. The front page had blossomed with color, and Our Own updated their logo. Our Own was publishing fewer full front-page stories and had increased the diversity of their news, implementing breaking news. Many local businesses were present in the paper as their ads increased. In 1994, Our Own, which had put more of a focus on national and breaking news, covered President Clinton's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. Our Own wrote multiple stories about it, regularly presenting information in a national lens. The paper still tried to connect with their community roots, but they had made a shift toward prioritizing national news over their community of origin. Our Own had expanded to continuous coverage, producing content regularly and following up on national events, rather than leaning into their newsletter roots. Our Own was beginning to shift away from highlighting local news and was growing into fully covering national news. After 22 years, Our Own Community Press had come to an end in August of 1998. They informed readers with a farewell issue that highlighted its influence in some important moments over the years. The paper had a lasting impact on both the many editors and writers that volunteered over the years, and also its readers.
Our Own has provided a place for me to express my professional journey and, perhaps more importantly, a place to work effectively for the liberation of all gays and lesbians,"
said Mark Heers, who worked on the paper for many years.
"Every time I participate in the publication of Our Own, I'm personally a little more liberated, and every time Our Own is published, the community is a little more liberated too."
Our Own maintained a balance for a long time of providing political news empathetically and in a community environment. In their final years of publication, the paper transitioned into apolitical reporting, which combined with the advent of the internet caused local queer community to pull away. Our Own maintained a relationship with their audience for many years, which not only differentiated them from other queer newspapers, but which also caused their publication and the local community to prosper. From providing news to the Unitarian Universalist Gay Caucus community to distributing to over a dozen states, Our Own had a significant impact on the queer communities that they touched.